Mr. Trump, thank you for being here this week.
Good morning. I guess Hillary is sleeping.
She has not done a press conference this year, so we've repeatedly put out these invitations. But we are looking forward to hearing more on what's happening on the economy. I know that this week on Monday in Detroit, you laid out a more refined plan for what you plan to do, but you also hinted in that speech that you'd be giving more details. Can you give us any hints about what is still to come in terms of filling out some of that economic plan?
Well, we gave pretty good detail in the speech. It was well reviewed and well received, I think, very basically, we're about getting rid of massive regulations, which are unnecessary, which are killing businesses and making it virtually impossible. I mean, no matter what you do, it's making it virtually impossible to start new businesses, and a lot of old businesses are being hurt very badly. Obamacare is being hurt. I mean, just absolutely decimating businesses if you look. And I've gotten to know so many small business owners and big business owners over the last period of 8 months. And I will tell you, Obamacare is devastating businesses. I get it all the time, and I really see it. I'm sort of like a pollster. I can take a poll of the pulse, and the pulse isn't good because businesses are being destroyed. They're being destroyed by high taxes, they're being destroyed by Obamacare, and they're being destroyed by regulation. And we're doing a lot about each.
In terms of what specifically? Part of the concern from some think tanks that are out there who ran the numbers before was that your plan would create a massive deficit. $10 to $12 trillion is kind of what the range ran. You laid out more details this week, and I know that many of the people we've talked to have pointed out that part of this is growth that will help with along the way. GDP would increase. Part of this is getting regulation. But can you put your arms around what kind of deficit your plan you think would create?
Well, I've heard $3 trillion. I think it's going to be much less than that. We'll have a long-term accumulated deficit of $3 trillion. I think that it's going to be much less than that, but we have to get our jobs started. We have to get our jobs back. Our jobs have been taken by so many countries. Our jobs have been taken by Mexico. Mexico is the eighth wonder of the world. Mexico, what they're doing down there. I go on rallies and I tell people that there is a man who's a friend of mine who builds plants. He builds massive plants for automobiles and for computers and for everything. And I asked him, how are you doing? He said, I'm doing great because of Mexico. Mexico is, he told me, he's the one that used the expression, it's the eighth wonder of the world, what they're building in Mexico. I said, how about the United States? He goes, not so much, and not doing great, not doing a lot. Where he is building is in Mexico and other places, but Mexico in particular. And we're losing businesses to Mexico like one after another. Ford is building a massive new plant. It's an extension of another one. It just keeps going. You look at Carrier air conditioning from Indianapolis, Indiana. They're going down. And we can't continue to lose our companies. We're not going to have any companies left.
Part of that is wages, though. What would you do to make America more attractive to these companies?
Well, you can compete within the United States. You can move to other states if you want. You can go out and go from, if it's the case of Carrier, you can go and compete with other states, and you'll get yourself a great deal. But you can't just leave the United States and there is no consequence. You have to pay a consequence if you're going to do that. In the case of Carrier, they let go of 1,400 very good people. They've been there forever. They move to Mexico. They make their product. They sell it in free with no tax, with no tariff into the United States. So we end up with losses. We end up with tremendous economic loss. We end up with joblessness. We end up with a tremendous amount of people now that can't get any more good jobs, and they will never in their whole lives be able to compete with the jobs they had. So we have to do something about that, and it's a very easy answer. When they make an air conditioning unit, they're going to pay something at the border. Every time they ship in a unit, they're going to have to pay something. Now, when we do that, they're not going to leave anymore.
Mr. Trump, it's Scott Wapner. It's great to have you here this morning.
Hello, Scott.
The Conservative Tax Foundation says that your tax plan will cost $10 trillion over 10 years. I'm wondering if you agree with that number, and if not, what the actual cost of your plan would be.
Well, I think what they were looking at were the other numbers. I've raised the numbers quite a bit for the rich. We've raised them, and yet a lot of the rich are benefiting because of the fact that I've really reduced taxes for business. The business has been, an unbelievable reduction, down to 15%. And right now we're we're the highest paid. We pay more than any other nation anywhere in the world in terms of business tax. And you can say industrialized world, most people like to say that, but pretty much anywhere, we're the highest tax nation. And that's going down into a low category, an actual low category at 15%. Also, for bringing money into the country, you know, we have trillions of dollars outside of the country. We're lowering that tax to 10%, so that people are going to bring, I think it could be as much as $5 trillion. A lot of people think it's 2.5. I mean, the stated number is 2.5. I think it could be 5. And we're bringing a tremendous amount of money back into this country, which will be used for lots of good things. But the money will be pouring back into the country. Right now, as you know, and you reported, you know, corporate inversions, right now, if you know, companies are leaving the United States to two reasons. To get their money, for one thing, they can't bring it back in, and also because taxes are so high. So I think this will have a tremendous growth effect, positive. Look, our growth is almost nothing. We're almost flat, which is hard to believe. You know, if China goes down to 7%, it's like a national catastrophe. We're going down now. We're 1.2%. We're going to be lower than that, it's looking like, in the coming quarters. Think of it. China goes down to 7%. And then what they do is they devalue their currency and they take more of our business and they start going up again.
Sure, but
we're like the whipping post of the United States. We have people that don't understand the system. We have people that don't get it. And we are being ripped by many countries, China being the number one abuser. They do it better than anybody else. But and by the way, no hard feelings towards China. I have the largest bank in the world as a tenant of mine. I have very big relationships with China. But the fact is that China is the great abuser of the United States economically, and we do nothing about it, and it would be very easy to stop.
And how do you reconcile sort of saying that your economic plan was well received and that it's expected to create the jobs that you've just told us it will, when Moody's comes out and says that your plan will cause a recession, create far fewer jobs than Hillary Clinton, and increase the deficit?
Well, it's a ridiculous statement that they come out. I assume they're Democrats because it's a ridiculous statement. My plan cuts taxes. She's going to be raising $1.3 trillion in taxes. My plan cuts taxes. My plan's going to lead to growth. We're going to have the jobs, not her. Now, I think they might have been looking at an old plan or something. It couldn't be this plan because everybody says this will create tremendous growth. Now, a lot of people think that because of the fact that I am going to negotiate trade deals like NAFTA, which has absolutely destroyed us, they think that I'm giving up on NAFTA. Well, I'm not, but they have to make it fair because NAFTA has ripped the heart out of this country, signed by Bill Clinton. It has been probably the worst trade deal, the worst economic trade deal ever signed by any country anywhere in the world. I mean, that's how bad it is. Okay, NAFTA has been one of the great disasters for this country. It was a deal signed by Bill Clinton. They may be talking about the fact that because I'm going to negotiate trade, I won't have any trade, and that will lead to jobs. Well, the fact that I'm negotiating trade will mean that we're going to make good trade deals, but we are absolutely going to keep trading. I am not an isolationist, and they probably think I am. I'm not at all. I'm a free trader. I want free trade, but it's got to be fair trade. It's got to be good deals for the United States. I was asked recently, well, what is your definition of trade? I say, make good deals for the United States, and ideally make great deals for the U.S. So we will be redoing some of these horrendous trade deals that have destroyed New York State. You take a look at what's going on up there, that have destroyed Pennsylvania, that have destroyed Michigan. Look at what's going on in Michigan. I mean, the car companies that are moving to Mexico in particular. I mean, it's unbelievable. I'll stop it. Hillary Clinton can't stop it. She doesn't have a clue.
Mr. Trump, let's talk about the corporate tax plan that you laid out, because you're right. The United States does pay much higher corporate taxes. Lowering that probably not as big of a deal in terms of revenue we bring in, because corporate taxes are only about 10% of the United States revenue. But when you lower the corporate tax rate to 15%, there is a loophole that exists in this existing plan that would allow wealthy people who have LLCs, sole proprietorships, S-corps, to kind of funnel their earnings back through that so that they would effectively be paying a personal income tax of 15%. How do you stop that,
well,
or are you okay with that?
And that's what we're coming in with. And as you know, in 2 weeks, we're coming back with additional information and additional details. And we may end many of the loopholes that are currently being used. We are, as an example, getting rid of carried interest, which is the darling of Wall Street. We are going to probably get rid of it. We are going to get rid of it. It's inappropriate. But what we have done is lower the tax rate so that even if people lose carried interest, and this is for business, and by the way, we've lowered the rate very much for the middle class. Look, we're going to create an economic engine that hasn't been done since Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan did something very similar, and it was a great success. But he did something very similar. We're stagnant. We are of stagnant growth. We are doing nothing. Take my friend, the man who builds the plants. I mean, he knows better than if I went out to the Wharton School and asked him to do a study that would take a year. The man who builds the plants can tell you in 25 seconds what's going on, and he understands the market better than anybody. He's a part of the market, and the growth isn't coming here. The growth is going to other countries, and the growth is going to Mexico big league. So
is it fair to say that you would not allow individuals to use that loophole to go ahead and have their carry-through income again going through?
We are looking at that very strongly. It's going to be reported on within 2 weeks.
Mr. Trump, Wilfred Frost here. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
In your businesses, you've used leverage in the past. When you look at the shape of the yield curve for U.S. Treasury debt at the moment, how low interest rates are, is this a moment for the U.S. to borrow and spend in order to stimulate growth? You spoke about infrastructure spend. Are you happy to boost the balance sheet, as it were, of the U.S. economy at the moment?
Well, I've always loved leverage, as Becky can tell you. I've always, respected leverage, but I've always loved it. But a country is a different thing. However, with that being said, the interest rates are at so low. I mean, the numbers are so low that, yes, this is a time to borrow, and to borrow long term, so that we can have the money and rebuild our infrastructure. We can have the money. We have things that we have no choice. Our military is very depleted, extremely depleted. People don't like to talk about it, but our military is absolutely depleted from all of the different things we're doing, and nobody knows where they are, who they're fighting. I mean, our people don't know anything. We have people, they have no idea. They're in so many different locations. Nobody knows what's going on. But the word depletion is the word that keeps getting used. We have to fix our military. We have to take care of our vets. Our vets are leading a disaster. I mean, it's a disaster what's going on with our vets and the Veterans Administration. We have to fix our infrastructure. Our country's infrastructure is in horrible condition, worst condition it's ever been in. Bridges are in dangerous shape. I think 50% of the bridges are in actually dangerous shape. When you think of that, that's incredible, where they could fall. Roads, tunnels, hospitals. I mean, everything we have to fix. The airports. Our airports are like third world countries. You go into some of these beautiful airports. You go into Dubai and you go into different places throughout the world, and you see airports that are unbelievable, that we've never had in this country. And then you fly into LaGuardia, or you fly into LAX, or you fly into Kennedy. Any of them. You fly into these airports, it's like a third world country. So we have to fix our airports and our transportation system and our trains, which are, 100 years old. I mean, we have trains from 100 years ago. Those are the good ones. And you go to China and you go to these other places and you see, the bullet trains. You see these trains that go hundreds of miles an hour. So we need to fix our country. We've spent so much money in the Middle East, $4 trillion they're saying now, and that means we spent more than that. But we've spent all this money in the Middle East. And by the way, we are now further away from something happening in the Middle East than if we did nothing. Had we done nothing, we would have been in much better shape in the Middle East. We've spent $4 trillion and maybe even $5 trillion in the Middle East. And we are right now much further away. I mean, like not even close. Much worse shape than had we done nothing.
How do we pay for that? And is it going to be public money? Is it private money? And as Wilfred just asked, what level of debt to GDP would you actually feel comfortable with?
Well, you could have combinations of private money, and you can have, you can even privatize certain things. But basically, you're going out and you're borrowing money on the United States to rebuild your infrastructure. It would be infrastructure money. And maybe there's ways of giving additional credits to people that buy these bonds, but because frankly, the interest rate would be so low.
That sounds a lot like Larry Summers.
Normally you would say you want to reduce your debt, and I like to reduce debt too, as much as anybody. The problem is you have a military problem, you have an infrastructure problem, a tremendous infrastructure problem, and you have other problems. And also, the asset is your rates are so low. What's going to happen when the rates eventually will go up and you can't borrow? You absolutely can't borrow because it's too expensive. It would destroy, our balance sheet, totally destroy the balance sheet. So you'd be paying so little interest right now. This is the time to borrow.
Mr. Trump, you said, and this is Scott again, that you would at least double what Hillary Clinton wants to spend on infrastructure. That would imply some $500 billion, $500 billion. What is the exact number that you're willing to spend on infrastructure?
Well, you need a lot more than that to do it right. Now, I'd also make sure that we use the proper procedures, because if you when you take a look at things, when you look at what we build, there's a hospital, a recent hospital, I won't even say where because I don't want to insult the people, but they're great people. I just left 3 days ago. It's a VA hospital. It's got a $1.2 billion cost overrun. That's an overrun, okay? The hospital should cost half of that price. They have a $1.2 billion cost overrun. Everything we build has a cost overrun. It's all cost overruns and a mess, and it's always trauma and trouble because they don't know how to build. Mm-hmm. I would employ things. As an example, I'm building the old post office on Pennsylvania Avenue for all to see. I was the successful bidder. I went out to bid. We're 1 year ahead of schedule. We're going to open in September. We're a year ahead of schedule, and we're, under budget. So I built it under budget. I built it ahead of schedule, and it's, that's like routine. That's right. What you have to do. When you look at these public works projects or these big highways, they come in for 2 and 3 and 4 times the cost of what they were supposed to come in at. You look at a hospital where they have a $1.2 billion cost overrun. It's insane. So one of the things we have to do is we have to make sure that we have very strong contracts, we have strong contractors, and we give them out properly. Mm-hmm. Right now, obviously, they're not giving out contracts properly because everything that comes in way over budget. You rarely see a federal project come in under budget and ahead of schedule.
Mr. Trump, your friend Carl Icahn called into my program at noon the other day and reiterated his support for you. He thought the speech that you gave in Detroit was, in his words, right on. But at the same time, he said, and I quote, "He's a smart guy, and I think he understands the mistakes he's made." He was referring to the controversy over the Kahn Gold Star family of a couple of weeks back. I'm wondering if this morning you're willing to admit that mistake that you made, and if you would like to clarify the comments that you made on the Second Amendment as well regarding Hillary Clinton.
Well, on the Second Amendment, everybody came to my defense because there was nothing said wrong. I'm talking about the power of the voter. And nothing was said wrong, and only the haters tried to grab onto that one, and it was very unsuccessful. We're talking about it has tremendous support and tremendous power at the voting booth, and that was all. As far as Mr. Khan, I think it's been said by everybody. I think that's been very well talked about, and that's been put to bed a long time ago.
Sure, but do you agree with your friend Carl Icahn that you made a mistake?
You'll have to define what a mistake means. I mean, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about economics, and we're here to talk about finance, and we're here to talk about our infrastructure. But it's been put to bed for a long time, and I don't think there's any reason for you to reopen it.
Mr. Trump, let me ask you, I'd like to return to this issue because it is something that's in the news right now. But before we do, I want to talk more economics. There is a lead story in the Wall Street Journal today that its story is all about how there's a home buyer shortage out there and how renters in this nation, a lot of the middle class, are missing out because they're not able to participate in the price gains we've seen in the real estate market. There's much less supply, 200,000 to 300,000 fewer homes that are being bought than we would normally see at a recovery at this point. And I just wonder what you think about that. As somebody who follows real estate so closely, the Journal article also ties it back, says a lot of the supporters who have gone to you and to Bernie Sanders before, when he was still in this race, are mad that they haven't been able to participate in this economic recovery that we've seen in home prices. What do you think this is going on? Well, they should be mad. And, you know,
many people, and I talk about it at my rallies, many people, it's very sad, Becky, they're making less money today in real dollars than they made 18 years ago. And in some cases, they're working much harder. They're working 2 jobs. It's supposed to be the opposite. They've gotten older and they're working harder. And many of my people, I have these rallies. Last night I had a rally, 10,000 people. That's not even a big rally for me. And there's tremendous anger at what's going on. I mean, people have worked hard. They've worked smart, but through so many different reasons, including Obamacare, which has been an absolute jobs killer. You know, it's put people on part-time jobs, okay, which they've never had before. But they're working harder than they did 18 years ago, and they're making less money. It's a statistic, and it's very sad. The other thing is, I guess, home ownership is down to a point that it's the worst it's been in 51 years. You know, it used to be the great American dream was a home, as you know. And home ownership now is down to a level that's incredible. It's 51%. So 51%, I mean, if you think about that, it's the lowest level that it's been in, I guess, 51 years. And, you know, that's not the American dream. The American dream is to own a home, and yet percentage-wise we have fewer of them. It's supposed to be the other way around. It's a devastating chart. It's a devastating number. I've seen the number up on your boards, but you take a look at that number. It's just crashing down over the last 5 or 6 years, just a crash down. And people would love to own a home, but they, for some reason, they can't. Now, the reasons are the reasons that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Donald, back to Scott's point, though. We have had several of your biggest supporters who have come on our air this week to talk about your economic plan, who said that they love your economic plan. They think it's a big winner. That includes Carl Icahn, Steve Forbes, Larry Kudlow, who's talked about all of these issues. But all of them have also said on our air that they wish you would stick to the economic message. They think some of these issues that you've brought up along the way are unforced errors. What do you tell them?
Well, I don't think I've made too many errors. Look, I beat 17 people. I started with 17. I now have one person who I think is pretty close to incompetent, Hillary Clinton. I think she's pretty close to incompetent. Take a look at the Washington Post story about Hillary Clinton from 2 days ago. I couldn't believe they wrote it because they never write anything bad about her. So they wrote a story about Hillary Clinton was a disaster as a senator from New York. She promised everything, delivered nothing. She was going to create a wonderful economic boom in upstate New York. Same word she uses right now. And she not only created no boom, New York State, upstate New York, and various other parts that she was talking about became disaster areas. I mean, and they are a disaster area. People have fled. Businesses have left. They've gone to Mexico and other places. It's a disaster. And then they compared that with my record, which was done by Steve Quazzo in the New York Post, where I built the city on the west side. I rejuvenated the Grand Central Terminal area when I built the Grand Hyatt, the Columbus Circle area when I did Trump International Hotel and Tower. I was there first. I got it going, and so many other areas. And, I mean, it was a very nice story, but I've done a lot. And I've done a lot in terms, they even mentioned the Woolman skating rink, you know, which was closed for 7 years. And they had spent $21 million trying to do it. And I had it fixed up in 4 months and opened, and I have it to this day, and it's a tremendous success. You know, I mean, it's a big difference. But Hillary Clinton, that Washington Post, everybody ought to get that story and put that story aside of her phony speech that she'll make today in the afternoon. Put that story and read that story before. They have to read it 2 days ago. She was a disaster for New York. She put in virtually no bills. The only bills were naming of a building and, you know, something that didn't matter much, like very, very unimportant. Got nothing passed. And all of her talk about upstate New York and all of her talk about revitalization was a total catastrophic event. And the voters of New York saw that, and they
Mr.
were not
Trump,
happy.
I appreciate that you're sticking to the message. I know. I've seen the article. I've read it.
Maybe it made more of an impact because it was in the Washington Post, which never writes badly about her.
But you're doing a good job of sticking to the message, but you have had Republicans, senators, and congressmen who have disavowed you because of some of the other comments that have come up this week. How do you even work with these people if you are elected? Are you going to...
Well, I have a lot of support within Republicans, but whenever somebody doesn't support me, it becomes a bigger story. And, you know, I just go, look, when I beat these 17 people, because there were really 18 if you think, so when I beat the 17 people, I wasn't exactly making myself popular, and I wasn't an insider. I was an outsider because of the fact I used to be like establishment, and then when I ran, I was the opposite of establishment, and I beat these people very badly. All right, so all of a sudden, and that's when I did best. I mean, frankly, when they were fighting me, those were. I mean, that was really when I did best.
But you understand this is a different stage now.
We have a lot of support.
I know, and I see it at your rallies. But this is a different stage, Mr. Trump.
So many other senators are supporting me. We actually do. But you have some people that, as an example, the list that signed the 50. These are the people that got us into Iraq. These are the people that got us into all of the messes that we're in all over the Middle East. These are the people that have us in an economic condition where China has literally ripped the heart out of us, where China's taken so much money that they've rebuilt themselves, and they're building massive military complexes in the middle of the South China Sea. These are the people that represented us. They know they're not working for me. I don't want these people. These people did a terrible job. And they know they're not getting jobs from me, so they'll go over to the other side.
Mr. Trump,
but if you look at the polls...
My attitude is this: whatever happens, happens. I'm giving it straight. I don't know that it will work because I'm a non-political person, and I'm proud of that. But I'm giving it straight.
Mr. Trump, you said...
I've done a great job. And now I'm doing a good job politically. I mean, I came from this massive field of professionals, all governors and senators and, people of vast talents. And those people got knocked off one by one by one. And now I'm down to the final person. And we're going to see how that, and you notice the polls are closing up very rapidly, which is fine. Don't forget, she has spent hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising. You know what I've spent, Becky? Zero.
But you've lost some of the Republican women. The latest poll from the Wall Street Journal shows that it's 72% of Republican women. Mitt Romney won 90% of that group and still didn't win the election. How do you...
We'll see what happens. I mean, we'll see what happens. I have a whole group of people out there that people don't even know about. I had a rally last night. We had 10,000 people. If Hillary had the rally, she would have had 200 people if she was lucky. So we'll see what happens. I don't know that translates into votes. In theory, it should, but I don't know that it translates into votes. What does translate into votes is she's done a terrible job as a senator from New York and totally, and by the way, totally documented in the Washington Post article. She's done a terrible job economically.
Mr. Trump, I want to ask you.
You have to put that article in because it was a long, detailed, very, very strong article when she's doing her speech, because she'll be making a speech and saying all the same things she said about New York, and she left, and it was a disaster. In fact, it cost us a fortune because of what she did, and it cost us a fortune, cost us jobs, cost us upstate New York. She did nothing.
Mr. Trump,
she did negative.
I want to ask you.
You have to look at that in light of her speech today, which I'm sure will be wonderful.
I want to ask you about the rally last night in Florida that you referenced, where you called the President of the United States the founder of ISIS. You said it repeatedly. President Obama is the founder of ISIS. He's the founder. He founded ISIS. Do you think it's appropriate to call the sitting president of the United States the founder of a terrorist organization that wants to kill Americans?
He was the founder of ISIS, absolutely. The way he removed our troops, you shouldn't have gone in. I was against the war in Iraq. I was totally against it, even though I was a civilian, so nobody cared. But we shouldn't have been in Iraq. I would not have been in Iraq if I were president, but that mistake was made. It was a horrible mistake, one of the worst mistakes in the history of our country. We destabilized the Middle East. We've been paying the price for it for years. but he was the founder, absolutely the founder. In fact, he gets in sports they have awards. He gets the most valuable player award. Him and Hillary, I mean, she gets it too. I gave them co-founder, if you really looked at the speech. I think you probably did. But he and Hillary get the most valuable player award, having to do with Iraq and having to do with the ISIS situation, or as he would call it, ISIL. He calls it ISIL because nobody else does, and probably wants to bother people by using a different term. And whether it's more accurate or not, most people call it ISIS. He calls it ISIL. He was the founder of ISIS, and so was she. I mean, I call them co-founders.
Well, so not only do you not think it was an issue,
and because of the way he got out, as bad as it was that they went in, they should have never gotten in. He shouldn't have gotten in the way he got out. He shouldn't have gotten out the way he got out. It was a disaster what he did.
How do you think? Is there
something wrong with saying that? Why are people complaining that I said he was the founder of ISIS?
I'm wondering how you think that's going to play in some battleground states.
Whatever it is, it is. Look, all I do is tell the truth. I'm a truth teller. All I do is tell the truth. And if at the end of 90 days I fall in short because I'm somewhat politically correct, even though I'm supposed to be the smart one, and even though I'm supposed to have a lot of good ideas, it's okay. You know, I go back to a very good way of life. It's not what I'm looking to do. I think we're going to have a victory. But we'll see. I mean, we'll see. Look at all of her pay for play and all of the stuff that's come out over the last couple of days where she's basically selling jobs and many other things. That's the least of it. What she does is illegal. She's done many illegal things. I mean, her emails, that's illegal. She wiped out 33,000 emails. Now, I don't know, you know, they tend to have a different standard. If anyone else knocked out 33,000 emails, they would be in a problem like you wouldn't believe. She knocked out 33,000 emails. She got away with it. Frankly, I think it's her single greatest achievement as a politician, getting away with that.
Look,
because other people, their lives have been ruined. She got away with it.
Mr. Trump,
missing 33,000 emails, and they say, oh, that's fine.
Some would point out.
I'm telling you, New York State, she was a disaster. As Secretary of State, she was a disaster. You take a look at Libya. You take a look at what she did. I'll tell you this. If Barack Obama had it to do again, now he'd never say this other than to his wife, if he had it to do again, he would have never chosen Hillary Clinton to be Secretary of State because those decisions have been a disaster. The line in the sand, so many decisions. Crimea gone. He talks about Crimea. He talks about the Ukraine.
Let me ask you quickly, if I could.
During his administration,
Mr. Trump,
will Trump be friendly with Putin? Well, I think it would be great. Number one, I don't know Putin. I couldn't care. I don't know Putin. But I think it would be great if the United States actually got along with Russia, which we don't. But on his watch, Crimea was taken, and you know, nobody mentions that.
Let me ask you, if I could, quickly before we go. You mentioned earlier how polls were, I believe in your words, tightening, yet the new NBC News Wall Street Journal Marist poll has you trailing in battleground states such as Iowa, Ohio, and Pennsylvania by wide amounts. How do you close that gap?
I just keep doing the same thing I'm doing right now, and at the end it's either going to work or I'm going to, I'm going to have a very, very nice, long vacation.
Mr. Trump, we want to thank you very much for joining us today. We do appreciate your time.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, CNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Here you're going to find videos packed with all of the information that you need to be smarter about your finances. You can subscribe by clicking right here and click on all the videos around me or the eye right here to watch the latest from CNBC. Thanks for watching.